Good evening, y'all. How are we doing? Hopefully well. I've got a few minutes of quiet and I'm going to try to talk about something that has been on my heart lately. Hopefully it's been on your all's heart. If it hasn't, let me encourage you to think about this thing tonight. The topic I want to talk about is prepping. I've talked about it before and I know lots of other channels are talking about it right now, like to the point that it's almost, okay, can we talk about something else? But it's so important. I really think it bears a few minutes, even though it's out there on so many things, because some of you may not be getting those videos. Some of you may not be reading about it or have a background and experience with that sort of thing. I apologize if the video is a little shaky. I am hand holding it on a small tripod. The tripod is not good for the location, so I'm kind of in hold, but it is what it is. This is where I had a moment to do my filming and we're just kind of going to go with it, but I apologize for the seasick motion if that bothers anybody. Anyway, prepping. I joke about my squirrel mode. I also have squirrel brain if you haven't figured that out with, getting distracted easily. But prepping is something that is really important to me. Growing up, my family did do a fair bit of it. Not to the same level that I do, in a way. My dad worked construction a lot of years, and so sometimes work would be feast or famine. So we would raise what we could in the garden. So we had a really big garden, much bigger garden than I have now. So that aspect, growing up, that was more in the garden and more was put away. So I did learn some good skills there, like canning and so forth. But their garden was huge. They also raised cows, and when I was really little, there was some pigs raised up on the farm. But there were several times we would do a cow butcher and put that away, and like the entire freezer would be full of that. And then there were times where we just didn't have a whole lot. So it would kind of go back and forth. But my parents would always put away what they could, and they would be very reasonable on purchases and expenses, on making sure that we were always fed. Never once growing up did I actually go hungry, and I'm very blessed for that. I know that's not true for everybody. But my parents did teach me to put away certain things when you're able to. And when the finances and the resources are there, whether you grow them, raise them, or whether you just buy them at the store, you put away what you can when you can. And for us, we do probably have more store-bought than my parents ever had, but in the same term, we don't have quite as much of the natural that I would like to have, just because we don't live on a farm. Growing up for a while, we were on a full farm. That made all the difference. I just don't have that resource at the moment. With my property, it's only, I think, a little over half an acre or something like that. And while we are not in town, we're not completely rural either. We're kind of in a little in-between village. So there are limits on what I can have from the village ordinance. It does like limit the number of chickens, things like that. So I can do a little, but I can't have a cow in my backyard because of where we live. Generally, I love where I live. That's the only thing I would change are those restrictions. I don't like those restrictions. We're not in an HOA or anything like that. I despise HOAs. I don't want anything to do with them. So I'm not nearly as restricted in that, but it does restrict me a little bit. I love the property, blessed for it. It's my only beef is the little restrictions that we do have. Anyway, it does kind of stop you from doing certain things. Now that said, we can go and buy from the local meat market and have a full cow. We could have a half cow, quarter cow, eighth cow, whatever. And here in the future, we will probably do that. But at present, the freezer space is not enough. We do have a really big freezer out in our garage and then kind of a smallish one, plus the normal freezer that's attached to our fridge. We have areas in our basement where we store dry goods and canned goods and then home canning, things like that. We just do what we can. I have not done the butcherings. So the meat's not as probably natural, or, well, meat's natural. I think you know what I mean. It's not as organic or anything like that as what you might get from a butcher. But all in all, what I usually do, and I think what most people are capable of doing, is I shop the sales. I'm a total cheapskate. I don't like to pay any more than I absolutely have to. But if I find a sale on meat or a manager special, I will buy as much as I reasonably can at that moment. and I tend to go around and I try not to buy unless something is a really good deal. Now, right now, my idea of a really good deal has definitely adjusted. It is not the same thing as it was 2 years ago, and I think that's the case for everybody. We all know that the price of beef is screaming high, and some stores much worse than others. I was utterly appalled at some of the prices I've seen at Sam's recently. I'm like, oh my goodness, and I see people talking about that as a good price, and I'm like, how? It is a terrible price, but it depends on where you are, the stores you have available, the time of day you go, and so many things. Generally, I've gotten pretty good deals at Save-A-Lot and Aldi. Once in a while, I might hit another store. Walmart's not great. Sometimes you can get decent deals on chicken still, just depending on where they're at. I don't find chicken prices nearly as bad as I find beef prices. There for a while, Aldi was pretty lagging behind and adjusting their prices upward. When Walmart was flying upward, Aldi was much slower to raise. So it depends, and it goes back and forth. It's not terrible, but in the same turn, if you find a really, really good deal and plenty of ground beef one day, I highly recommend, if your budget will allow it, buy you some extra. If you find a really, really good deal on flour, buy you some extra. I will tell you, Walmart has the really large bags, probably about cheaper than anybody if you're buying plain all-purpose flour. It depends on what you buy. Personally, I try to avoid the carbs for myself, but my family doesn't, or my kids especially don't. So that affects things. We still buy most normal things. I try to store things like wheat berries, but I have a wheat grinder, so I can grind that up into my own flour. I do store regular all-purpose, sugar, plenty of rice because our family likes rice really well. We store some beans, but not a ton because my family they're just not really into beans. I like them, grew up on a ton of beans, but my family does not dig them. They'll eat green beans, but they don't really dig dried beans too much. But we store some because they're a decent source of protein for a shelf-stable dried product. We store plenty of meat out in those freezers. It's not as much as I would like in some ways, but it's not bad. I can also home can with pressure canning the meat. I want to try to get into doing more of that. Did some broths and stuff recently, and I did a batch of ground beef into taco meat. I don't love the taste of canned meat compared to frozen. I think frozen is so much better, but I think it's good to have your eggs in multiple baskets. That way, if God forbid you lose your freezer and things really collapse, and you at least have some good shelf-stable stuff. You can buy corned beef, salmon, tuna, salamis that are shelf-stable, all sorts of things like that, so you can have proteins too. My recommendation is, if you don't have a lot of food stores, then every week or however often you shop for groceries, if it's monthly, same, set aside a little bit extra if you can and stock up. Get a little extra of whatever's on sale. Make your stock ups the sale price of something that, you know what, this beef is a good price, or this week crackers are really on sale, whatever it is. Do your best to try to stock up on the thing that's on sale, and in time you'll find you have a better store than you did before of reserves and supplies. A lot of people will heavily stock disposables. I don't get crazy about them. I have some. We have toilet paper reserves and a few paper towels, tissues, not anything crazy though, because I feel like all of those things are easily enough substituted by handkerchiefs or using family cloth, which I know people find it gross, but you don't have to have toilet paper to survive. You can live with some cut up cloths and rags and wash them. There's other ways around those things. So I recommend, rather than put your money into disposables, put it into foods and things that will help you for the long term, especially dry goods that are shelf stable. Some things like flours and especially wheat berries will last a long time. Wheat berries last much longer than flour, which is interesting. Rice will last a very, very long time, and if you eat plenty of it, store you a variety of it to help with boredom. Make sure you store spices and bouillons and things like that to help you have good flavor if you can. Do what you can and do the best with the funds that God has provided you. Not everybody can do very much. Some people can do a little, some people can do a lot. We have had, not changes in income, that's not the right word, changes in budget. that we have been dealing with. We had to put a roof on, and we had HVAC and stuff fail with our house, and other huge things that's caused major budget changes for us. So we have to work around and deal with that the best we can. I think all adults have that stuff happen. You just work with it, store what you can, and make sure that you have thought these things out. Have yourself some goals set. You say, okay, I want to have a week's worth of food extra. Okay, I want to have 2 weeks. Keep doubling your goal. Keep extending it out until you're at a place you're comfortable. There are some people who want 2 years worth of food extra. There are some people that 2 months, some people's 2 weeks. Personally, I like a few months. We don't have a crazy long amount, but a few months I think is adequate. It'll work and get you through most situations, I'm hoping. Of course, some of the situations going on right now are a little scary, but our faith and hope and trust is in the Lord and not in these worldly things, and nothing will happen that is not within His will is kind of the way I'm looking at it. I do think it's really important that you plan ahead when you got major holidays or birthdays or things that you want to give gifts for. You need to probably plan ahead and buy a little earlier than you might normally. We've all heard about the ships offshore that are not unloading their goods and things like that. So do the best you can. Highly recommend homemade gifts and handmade. Those are awesome and save you a lot of money. Do the best you can with that. Not everybody has the same skills, but usually you have some kind of skill, I bet, that you can do something for some family members with saving some money and do homemade and put a lot more thought and love and time into it, because that alone can be a big gift. Sometimes just giving somebody the gift of time, helping them out with something, can be a very big blessing. So just things to think about. I know it's kind of all over the board, but the thing that I want to get you guys thinking about tonight is, how prepared are you? If you haven't already thought about this, I think a lot of you probably have after the last year, but I don't know. How prepared are you? What if the store does go empty? What will you do? Hopefully we don't see any major long-term empties. I know that I've had some friends in the North Carolina area. I think the other one's a Carolina in general. I forget if she's north or south. I've seen Tennessee. All those areas seem to be really having a lot of low stock in their stores, really low. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos from those areas, and I'm like, wow, those are much lower than, like, if I go to my Dollar Tree or my Walmart or any of the other stores we have, or Aldi. They look okay. I have had a few odd instances, like one day I went into Aldi and there were no eggs at all, other than the organic kind, and everything else was wiped out, but that was not the norm. Most of the time I've been able to get stuff. A couple times my Walmart, if I've done that, has had more subs than usual, but nothing crazy. So I don't know, why are some areas having much worse shortages than what we are? Where I'm in Northeast Ohio, kind of in the Amish country area. Maybe it's because we're in a more rural area, I don't know. But generally our stores don't look too bad, at least not yet. So I'm hoping they don't get bad. Definitely don't want that. So we'll see how things go. Just plan and prepare. We're coming into the proverbial holiday zone, and then of course winter, and winter you especially want to plan. One of the things I really want you to think about tonight is, as we're coming into winter, and depending on where you live, think about backup heat. So what if we have a major power down, like Texas had that loss of power last year that absolutely devastated so many of those houses that we just weren't prepared for it. And I don't blame them for not being prepared, because that's not normal for them. Their houses aren't built for what they had to withstand there. But are you prepared for winter coming, and do you have a backup heat source? That's my first huge question. I think we all need some kind of a backup heat. For us, our fireplace has gas and will run without power. That's number one. We do have a kerosene heater too. To run the kerosene, I feel it's important to have a carbon monoxide detector. We've got a couple of them. So that is our backup heat for now. I would love to have like a wood stove or something like that put in eventually, but that's further down the road. What kind of backup heat source do you have? My mom had to get one last year too, because she had an extended power outage from ice storms, and that stuff is not fun. It can really take you out for a couple weeks at a time, and if it's the dead of winter and we happen to be in one of those polar vortexes or whatever name they're going to come up with next, you want to have some kind of backup power. What will you do to keep your family warm? One of the huge things I've heard that people can do if they have no source is use a tent inside their house, and then their collective body heat can go a long way to help keep them warm. I'm like, that's pretty awesome. There's various things like tea light heaters and all that. Those, yeah, can be dangerous if depending on how you use it, if you don't use common sense as you use it. But there's things that you can do even without a big budget like those. Have those in your house, have them ready just in case. One of the things that really bugged me that I kept seeing about the Texas thing last year is so many people were having their pipes burst. They didn't have experience with that. We had that happen a lot growing up, partly because of the trailer we lived in. The pipes and plumbing were insulated good, and it was a lot of CPVC, and that would get frozen, and you had to be prepared for that. But the thing that boggled my mind is so many people didn't know where their shutoff valves were. Make sure you know where your shutoff valve is. That is a huge, simple point of preparedness. Make sure it's working. Every year, a couple times a year, go through and turn on and off all your valves in your house to keep them movable. The hard water will stop them to keep them from moving, and you want to make sure, if you can't do any of them, make sure you do it with your main. I don't know how everybody's houses are. Ohio, we bury our true main shutoff like that the water department does. It's buried deep in our yard. That's hard to get to, but the pipes that come into the house, there is a main shutoff, and that's right before the meter. So make sure you know how to shut that off. It will prevent tons of water damage if you have a burst pipe, whatever. Water hose is something to watch out for, to make sure you have frost-free things on them. I had to replace some of our plumbing this last year. We didn't have a burst line, but the one of the hoses wasn't properly the right type of valve. You want the frost-free valve, especially here in Ohio. And it's possible you have a shutoff valve for your hoses that way, because those are some of the most common breaks when it comes to winter, and they can come back and flood into your wall, causing tons of damage with your insulation and things like that. But simply knowing where your shutoff valves are is a good first step to prevent a lot of damage in winter power outage situations where you don't have heat for extended period of time. Realize the lines can freeze fast, and if they do freeze, you better get that valve off before that water comes back on. You better get that valve off, or you will have so much damage, and you don't want that. Much better to turn the valve off and then let the bust. What's the proper conjunctuation or whatever of that verb? Busted, whatever. I don't know. I've lost it. Anyway, make sure that you know where your shutoff valve is and that you can get that off. And if you do have a line problem, then you can go ahead and get that taken care of by a plumber or fix it yourself. Some plumbing's really not that bad, depending on what type of lines you have. I've been learning it, so you do what you can, and the more that you do yourself, the better it is. Getting you a few tools helps save a lot of money. So anyway, I have been all over the board with this, but hopefully you've taken away the main focus is prep. Please prep you some food, prep you some winter heat especially. And just think, okay, so if I lost stores, what would I need? If I lost my electric, what would I need? If I lost my gas, or however you heat your home, what can I do? Think about those scenarios, pre-think them out, and have some kind of a backup plan. Even if you can't get your backup plan fixed right now, start thinking about it and make yourself a list. Okay, well, this week I'm going to work on fixing this problem. This week I'm going to hit this backup plan and solve this problem. Go through and do it, because I feel like those preparations can really be vital for our families. Like the Bible talks about that the virgins were prepared with the oil. I don't have the verse in front of me, but if you're a Christian, you've probably heard of this scriptures. Be prepared with your oil. Be prepared. Do the best you can. I realize it's not perfect. There's still quite a few things around here that I would like to do. Like I said, I'd like to install wood heat. I would like to get some chickens and put them in my backyard. Probably my neighbors won't like that very much, but we'll see. I am able to do a few, but I'd have to build them an enclosure and things like that first, but I want to do that. There's various other things that I would like to do, but time and money are a factor for me too. I'm sure they are for everybody, but do the best you can, get you some things lined up, and go from there. And I hope this video finds you guys blessed today. And while some of these things here are scary, I know it's a scary topic, I'm almost sick of hearing about the prepping thing. It's important, but it's far more important that we have faith and trust in God. He will get us through. I know that. And He will guide us, and He has a way of guiding us right to what we need first. So if you feel Him tugging at your heart to take care of this particular prep first, make sure you do that. Make sure you knock those out first. So anyway, I hope you guys have a very blessed night, whatever night that you see this. Right now it's Saturday night. I have no idea when I'll get it uploaded, but we will see and go from there. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.